through the post 9/11 truth lens, which was good, right? It was the right thing to awaken to the kind of government corruption we were seeing there. Nation building, forever wars, quote unquote, extracting resources from other nations. That is the wrong lens for analyzing this current administration.
It really is, because it's true that we've all been traumatized by that. Like the whole world, not just Americans, but the entire world has seen time and time again these neocon, New World Order, regime change kind of operations happening one by one. Well, why might that be? That would be because we've been under the thumb of the globalists, who we would define as the globalists, or Davos, the Great Reset, the Fabian networks that have built modern governance. But the Trump administration, what we're trying to communicate to people is that it is doing something different. It is doing something new. And so to simply ignore that and not do any analysis based on the actual facts that the Trump administration has asserted time and time again through its public speeches and through its national security strategy, and also the concept that we've been talking a whole lot about lately, the American system, the Hamiltonian system. So we've been told along the way that all we had was the choice between free markets or like socialism. But the thing is there's actually an American economy that has been hidden from us, that we haven't been educated about. Like, they've hid it from us, and the Trump administration has said, no, we're going to go that way. In fact, in the Rose Garden, he erected a statue for Alexander Hamilton. So what we're trying to say to the public right now is it's really important that people study, read the national security strategy, get on board, understand what Hamiltonian economics is. It's the American system, and it literally goes against globalism. It goes against the actual empire that was controlling everything that the United States was doing. So this is really important, and if you're not going to acknowledge that at all on any level, then quite frankly, I don't think you need to be speaking, because this is the premise and this is the operation to which the administration is operating right now. And just to ignore that, honestly, it's either ignorance and laziness at best, or you're actually one of the people that's out there, working against the recovery of our U.S. Constitution and our liberty, the rules-based order that is ordered liberty, right? Unalienable rights. So it's really important that we start from there, because that's what the globalists and the Marxists like to do. They like to move the goalposts forward and get the argument to start at a different vantage point, so that we'll all ignore the fact that the Trump administration is trying to literally take not just the United States, but the whole world in a different direction that respects national sovereignty.
Okay. And so today we will give some more details, because I've done a little more background on the American system, a long intellectual tradition of anti-globalism that existed. Now, when we say, they weren't thinking of it as globalism.
No, they were thinking, we don't want imperialism and we don't want empire. That's why our founders left Europe.
Yeah. So in the sense of the founders, and up through Lincoln and Henry C. Carey, who was his economic advisor, the idea would have been, as you said, anti-imperialism, anti-empire, particularly anti-British Empire. If you need to have these pieces in place to understand what's taking place on the global stage, particularly regarding our administration now. So let me play this clip from Barbara here, because this will be a good intro.
I want to say one other thing to cue up Barbara is we've often talked and written about what is called the empire of the city. And that is the three-prong power hub, if you will. It's traditionally what we've seen for the last 80 years is it's been London, Washington, D.C., and the Vatican. So what we're stating to you today is that the Trump administration's Iran strategy is being framed that is being reframed as regime change, but it's actually what it's doing is it's targeting a break from forever wars. It's targeting a break from City of London, a break from the Vatican control, right? So it's a break from imperial. It's a break from empire that has shaped the Middle East conflict for over a century now. So that's the frame in which we want to be thinking about this.
So to summarize and ground what you just said, it is actually a break from the policy of regime change and forever wars and nation building and spreading democracy.
Right. This is doing something new, guys.
Okay, so one of the pieces of evidence that tells us that's true is the breakup of the United Kingdom, United States allyship, strategic allyship. And there is a lot of history there to understand why, or to make the case that, in fact, specifically the City of London, which is the financial arm of that particular empire.
Yeah, they're kind of like the think tank financial arm, and then Washington, D.C. has traditionally been like the military force, and then Rome, Vatican has been the religious aspect. You know, like they want to claim the moral high ground on the religious umbrella.
Yeah, so that's what you have to understand this history to understand trade wars, imperial trade wars, British imperial trade wars. They never wanted the United States, or they never wanted the colonies to become the United States. They never wanted it to become a sovereign nation. Right. And that's the theme that you want to carry forward through this show. And as you think about this, is return to sovereignty.
Yeah.
And it's not just our nation.
Right.
The Board of Peace is particularly focused on helping establish and promote sovereign nations.
Right. It's peace through construction. So it's peace through sovereignty.
Which is the opposite of managed decline.
Which is the opposite of managed decline and the opposite of being absorbed into centralized nodes. Okay, so this whole thing is like, if you're not talking about the direction that the Trump administration is telling you that this country is going in, you're going to miss the whole argument. You're going to not understand what's actually happening at all whatsoever.
All right.
And that's quite dangerous.
The old lens assumed America was trying to manage the entire world, and that was part of the deal. But the current doctrine is about restoring national sovereignty and pursuing limited objectives in foreign policy. So listen to this, because this will give you some more of the evidence of what we're talking about.
On Saturday, President Trump posted something on Truth Social that every financial editor in London read very carefully, and that almost nobody in American media explained correctly.
The United Kingdom, our once great ally, maybe the greatest of them all. We don't need them any longer, but we will remember.
We will remember, he says. And look at this post. Here it is. United Kingdom, once our great ally. Maybe the greatest of them all, is finally giving serious thought to sending 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East. Yeah, well, never mind. That's okay, Keir Starmer. We don't need them any longer, but we will remember. We don't need people that join wars after we've already won. President DJT. All right, so that's where we want to start with you, and maybe we should just.
You know what's funny too? What? I was looking at the numbers like when the show started, and then when we started talking about this, half the people dropped off. So people really just they're not even open to hearing this message at all. Which is,
it's hard to trust what YouTube puts out anyway.
Right. Well.
But yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Well, I guess what I was going to say is that particularly. The viewers, our viewers over the years, look at it this way: if you want to understand whether or not we're just brainwashed MAGA-tards, look back 6 months in our videos, and you'll see some very harsh criticism of the administration. and
Yes.
certain things that they were doing.
Right.
Now, at this point, we've identified something that is serious, something that deserves more attention. And because you support a doctrine doesn't mean that you've been blinded and you can't think for yourself anymore and you're just on the MAGA train. I don't identify as MAGA. None of that matters to me. What matters is the truth.
Right.
And resistance to evil.
And here's the thing. This is really a huge point. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Brad, but it's just, there's a movie. It's called Don't Look Up. And I'm not sure any of you have seen it out there, but it really illustrates this point super well. It's about an asteroid that's heading to Earth. And, you watch the social media environment blowing up with different theories about, is it real? Is it fake? All these different influencers gaining ground on what it could mean, like, is it a psychological operation? The thing is this, if it's true, I just invite you, if you're critical of what we're saying, go and study these documents for yourself. Look at the American system, read about the American system of Hamiltonian economics, read the national security strategy yourself, listen firsthand to the talks that, Rubio and Trump and Vance are giving, and ask yourself, is this something that they're actually earnestly pursuing? Do you see in the international sphere people reacting to this in visceral ways? I think the answer is yes. There is a shakeup. And so here's the thing. If we don't recognize that there are actually still people in this government that want to save America, we're going to miss the boat. Like, we're going to basically vote or get apathetic, all the different buckets that they want us to fall into, and we're going to miss the opportunity to save this nation during the midterms. Okay? So we can't get apathetic and we can't be divided over this. Do your research, do the homework. I'm sorry if I sound like I'm badgering, but I just really want to make the point that with that movie, for example, Don't Look Up, it's like the psychological warfare here is also part of it, because the globalists, just entertain me for a second, the globalists, they have control basically of media. They have control of algorithms, what gets suppressed, what messages get amplified. They're literally the best assets that they have right now, because open your mind to the fact that, okay, let's say that the Trump administration is trying to dismantle this thing. And we have argued consistently that what we've been seeing is that in Venezuela, in Mexico, in Iran, even in places in Africa, there are things that the Trump administration is doing to go after some of these stronghold nodes that the globalists have. They use illicit capital and all kinds of nefarious ways of gaining money to keep this thing going. And so it's like we're cutting those points off in order to try to knock out some of the ways that they stay strong, they stay funded, because we also defunded them by withdrawing from the United Nations. So keeping all of that in mind, the thing that they have going for them is that they have propaganda. They are masters at propaganda, what is known as sophistry and casuistry. They know how to manipulate people. The war is going on for the mind. I know you guys are totally aware of that, but just conceive for a moment, one of the strongest things that they have going for them is trying to convince you that the Trump administration is just the same old, and that there's nothing new happening here. There's no need to look at this stuff about the national security strategy. That's all BS, Just ask yourself, of course they're going to try to do every single thing they can to divide the people that support the Trump administration. They're going to try to undermine that. The other thing that they're going to do is they're going to bring about all of these little legions of armies that they've developed that they literally fund and cultivate through the NGOs. Again, some of that goes on around in South America, it goes on in Mexico, but it also goes on, as we've seen, in places like Minnesota, or places out in Portland and Seattle, Antifa. But it also goes on, as we've seen, in places like Minnesota, or places out in Portland and Seattle, Antifa. But it also goes on, as we've seen, in places like Portland and Seattle, Antifa, but it also goes on, as we've seen, in places like Portland and Seattle. What in the world was that? Okay, see? Things like this, people. Things like this.
Yes.
But we
Excellent.
made it to the other side.
Well done.
Oh my
Professionals.
gosh. Right.
Real professionals over here. Where's my trombone?
So they're going to try to put together their the ways that they've been indoctrinating the kids, with all of this stuff. I'm just trying to bring it into a one culminating point.
Okay.
So they've got in the way that they're trying to indoctrinate the illegal aliens when they bring them into the indoctrination centers, and they try to tell them that the people that want to adhere to the U.S. Constitution, well, they're just racist and they're just white supremacists. This is Marxism, guys. We've been surrounded by basically a communist fascist takeover. So we're getting rid of those strongholds. And so just be aware that right now, the greatest threat is all of this propaganda to divide us. And I just, thanks for hanging in with me while I got that out.
So there's an article that we have about this too, and I thought it was the subtle serpent of suspicion. It does talk about the mindset that causes us to evaluate these things from sometimes the wrong perspective.
Right.
The fact that we have grown up in a world or in a nation where Marxist ideas, the socialist worldview was so imperceptibly embedded in our schools, in our culture, from Hollywood.
So what it wants to tell you, deconstruction. It's time to tear it all down because it's all evil.
How do you feel about the text when you read something, right? Instead of what's the author's intention? Things like that. The idea that America was never a Christian nation. In fact, it was never good. It was founded by racists and white supremacists.
Or occult magic, depending on what end of the spectrum you're willing to go.
Dealt with that too. So you have to be aware of what lens you're using to evaluate what you're looking at. So we have to be very careful about that. And again, as Summer said, we've all been traumatized by the COVID era and 9/11 and everything in between. We don't have good reason to trust our government. That is a fact. But the point we're making here today is that today there is a different paradigm. And as Christians, when we look at an issue, we are compelled by Scripture to use just weights and measures. In other words, to look at the issue fairly, to weigh everything before us. And so the real question, example with Iran, the real question isn't whether America uses power, it's whether that power is used to build an empire or whether it's used to restore sovereignty and stability. So the strongest evidence of a strategic discontinuity, and in just a minute we'll get into the point about this long tradition of economic history that we have before the World War I and World War II of anti-imperialism. And that is what this administration is seeking to return to. So some evidence to back up what we're telling you.
Like
First,
we're leaving empire. We're leaving imperialism. We're not trying to become empire. We're not trying to become imperial, if you will, like even you've got people on Glenn Beck's show and his syndicate of people. What is his name? McIntyre?
Orrin McIntyre.
Yeah, he's out there
saying we should embrace it.
Well, yeah, he's like, America's always been an empire, and we should embrace it, and rah, rah, rah. And I'm like, that again, that
hasn't always.
That is so, again, starting from a it's like revisionist history
well,
or
the
just
point,
plain
okay,
ignorance.
You just reminded me of this earlier. The thing you just said, which is something I said earlier that I didn't clarify, was the assumption of empire. It hasn't been the American empire. It has been the British Empire.
Right.
Because, again, we've
been under the thumb of empire, the British Empire.
Yes, but it doesn't look like it did back then. So you won't see the same things that you'll read about in history books then, but you'll see the same tactics at work from who we call the globalists today. Mm-hmm. So some of the evidence that shows you to back up what we're saying, first of all, the administration in 2020, January of this year, the withdrawal memorandum directed the United States to withdraw from 66 international organizations, including both the United Nations Population Council, included the World Health Organization, several other climate bodies, explicitly on the grounds that they no longer serve American interests. In fact, that they undermined U.S. sovereignty. So the White House described that move as restoring American sovereignty, quote unquote. That's not a small policy tweak. That's not that's not the policies of George H.W. Bush or W. Bush or Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. In fact, it was policies of Barack Obama that got us into this situation with Iran, because he just
Handed
enabled
them pallets of cash.
lifting sanctions, enabling them to continue their project of being the mothership of terrorism.
Because that's what empire does. They make sure that things are chaotic so that there can't be, in those regions where the oil is coming out of, for example, so that the people there can't stabilize that region and become sovereign. So it's a way of destabilizing and keeping other competitors away from it.
So economically, you've got the internationalist system, the system of imperial economics take over the resources of weaker nations versus the American system. I'll get to those details here in a minute so you'll know exactly what that is. That's not a small policy tweak. That is not something that's happening to empower or remain part of the liberal international order. That is an institutional repudiation of that order.
Let me just read this small paragraph here. It says, when the Trump administration came back into office, he came in with an explicit program: tariffs to rebuild manufacturing, energy dominance to drive down costs, deregulation to unleash industrial investment, and a sovereign wealth fund to finance national development. He revived Hamilton's American system, the very system that the CFR's Project 1980s has attacked over and over by name and has consciously tried to suppress. It's this system, this economic system that goes against globalism, that goes against empire. Okay, so this is the American system coming back online after being dormant and suppressed by the British Empire, the City of London, which is AKA Davos, AKA the Great Reset, AKA, the Fabian Marxist globalists.
Yeah, so what you just mentioned there about Project 1980s, that was the Council on Foreign Relations program for controlled disintegration,
which we know is degrowth. Now, that's the rebranded version of it.
Right. So let me go down here and get to my head. Let's see here. So barely known is that Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan's predecessor, Paul Volcker, in 1979, actually instituted a policy of controlled disintegration. The New Federalist and Executive Intelligence Review are the only publications of note over the years that have exposed and discussed this bombshell at length. In a recent issue of the EIR, writer, this article is from 2001, by the way. In a recent issue of EIR, writer Richard Freeman says that this policy was to serve as a cornerstone of a major policy shift in the United States. The purpose was to level the physical economy of the wider world economy with particularly destructive effects in the U.S. That is think tanks within our own nation determining that to sort of manage in a managed way, slowly decline
and
the American economy and sovereignty.
It's also a coded way. Let's not be silly here. Let's not be naive. It's a coded way of saying we're going to steal all your stuff and bring you into a neo-serf class so we can control you. It's a nice way of saying, oh, from abundance to scarcity, you guys are being too excessive, so we really need to streamline and make that try to make that sexy. It's like marketing. Like it's a nice way of saying in a clinical way that we're going to be taking all of your resources and your property and your,
Yeah.
it's communism. It's the transfer of
Yes.
everybody's wealth into, communist fascists, which is the same side of the coin, just different faces of the same coin.
This article does a pretty good job of helping to ground some of the things that we're saying here too. Freeman explains that the British started the implementation of this policy in the late 1960s. Again, the policy of controlled disintegration
Degrowth.
of economies, of the global economy. Here in the U.S., the CFR was talking about the controlled disintegration of our economy, to level the playing field for globalism. All right, so thoughtful observers returning to Britain in those years were experiencing the drastic and negative effects, which seemed a determined change for the worse. So what they were seeing even back then was the decline of European cities, particularly here in Britain to begin with, which we see today in spades throughout Europe. Some of the great cities that are overrun with this uncontrolled, unmitigated migration.
And as we know, those are agents of development. But and we see everything accelerated in Europe because they're more captured by this Fabian Marxist regime. So everything's happening over there quicker than it is here.
You'll like this line they get to eventually here because it is Fabian. It is absolutely Fabian. Why else would a nation enjoying great wealth fall into this measure of unwarranted deprivation and decadence? The breakdown continues to this day, and this is 24 years ago. First, uncontrolled free trade destroyed Britain's strong base of manufacture. Then went her mines and shipyards. Then the UK experienced the society debilitating, deregulated energy policies with its high prices and inefficiencies. All right, now let me jump down here. Freeman in the EIR reveals that Volcker's activities were guided by the controlled disintegration policies of one of the oligarchy's central institutions in the U.S. It was the New York Council on Foreign Relations, more commonly known as the CFR. Particularly, starting in 1973, the CFR embarked on a massive nation-changing project it named Project 1980s. This is going to help you understand why H.W. Bush, W. Bush, Clinton, and Obama were working on this kind of policy, because the Council on Foreign Relations pretty much had a very, had its tentacles deep within the executive branch for sure, and in the legislative as well. This project had at its core
NAFTA.
The policy of controlled disintegration. Exactly.
NAFTA
comes about
takes all the
under
industry out.
Under Bill Clinton's first term, and that would have been when you saw auto manufacturing in Detroit leave, and then that area becomes one of the most depressed areas in the world.
And think about it. Honestly, anywhere where you see like strongholds of Democrats, because that's a party that's been hijacked, you see where they'll extract money out. And so you've got these cities that are American cities, once very prosperous, going bankrupt.
Same tactic that they use on the global imperialist model is also used within the nation to extract wealth out of cities.
Right.
This project had at its core the policy of controlled disintegration. The top figures of Project 1980s within the Trilateral Commission were chosen to serve as the top leadership and run the government of former Trilateral Commission member Jimmy Carter in 1977. Paul Volcker was appointed Federal Reserve Chairman of the board in August 1978 by then President Jimmy Carter. It was on November 9th, 1978, that Volcker delivered the Fred Hirsch Memorial Lecture at Warwick University in England. Volcker cited Hirsch and affirmed the policy by saying, and I quote, "A controlled disintegration in the world economy is a legitimate object for the 1980s."
Right. And what is Trump saying? He's saying, grow, baby, grow. We're not going to do that anymore. Rubio
Good
coming
point.
out and saying, we're not going to engage in this managed decline of the West.
Which article was that quote in? I'll find it. It's good. I'll find it right here, right quick. I think I can get to that one fast. Because there it is. No, that's the video.
I've written so many, it's hard to.
Yeah. Well, and we have that. We talked about that here, and it's in
It's
the
right here.
article.
We in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. That is save the nation state.
Oh, okay.
The American system returns. So
Date?
February 19th.
Okay, good. There we go. February 19th.
Yep. So,
There
Rubio,
it is.
he comes out and says that. Also, Trump has said it too.
Right. Yeah, there you go. There's Rubio's quote right there. And we do affirm that this statement captures something far deeper than political rhetoric. It reflects a growing recognition that the policies guiding the West for decades have not simply been the result of economic drift, but of deliberate choices that reshaped industry, labor, and national sovereignty. So back to the article here. Freeman adds it was not by chance that starting the week of October 6 through 12, 1979, Paul Volcker began raising interest rates by raising the federal funds rate and increasing certain categories of reserve requirements for commercial banks. He kept pushing rates upward until by December 1980, the prime lending rate of U.S. commercial banks reached 21.5%.
Right. And let's bring up the shipping. What's happened with insurance and shipping industry right now? So you see Lloyd's of London. They were controlling like information, who gets access to what, how much they'll be charged to gain access to which markets. And Lloyd's of London, that was insuring ships like in the Strait of Hormuz, is now they've said we're not going to do that anymore. And guess what? America steps in and said we will, and we have a navy. Britain doesn't have a navy anymore. The City of London apparatus, which is the EU, the Great Reset apparatus, they don't have a navy anymore. They just let go of Lloyd's of London. That is a huge gain for the United States. Why did they let it go? Well, because they couldn't insure it. They couldn't back it with the unpredictabilities of the the unpredictabilities of the ships moving through the strait there, the Strait of Hormuz. So this is another way in which, you're seeing this globalist system. They're crumbling right now, but they don't want you to understand that. They're trying to obfuscate that from everybody. But if you look at what's happening, they're losing. Like they made money on that, like getting a lot of money off of people needing to pay them in order to sail across the world.
Yeah, so particularly it was war risk coverage. They are still covering, but under very limited circumstances. War risk coverage for the Persian Gulf and Red Sea is still being provided, but only under specific high-cost single voyage agreements. So effectively, you have removed the typical insurance that these ships would have to operate on the seas. So you've priced them out. Essentially, that is the same thing as making it unpayable. Price hikes. War risk premiums have increased drastically, with some reports indicating costs rising from roughly $25,000 per year to $30,000 per week. See that? They raised rates from $25,000 per year, in some cases, to $30,000 per week. All right, and this is really because they're not in control of the region anymore. So here's where this piece finishes up, and this is the part I thought you might really like. In the strictest sense of the Fabian politics of gradualism, controlled disintegration would in time accomplish the goal. And what was the goal? To enable globalism, to bring down the West, to bring down the United States economically, to break down the
Western
nation state itself.
civilization.
Right. To usher in globalism, internationalism. And so, of course, in the strictest sense of Fabian politics of gradualism, remember what their logos are. One is the turtle. The other is the sheep, wolf in sheep's clothing.
Right.
So
That's the ideological capture, as well as, the system that extracts everything out.
So the Fabians are an aristocratic
Oligarchy.
socialist body of mostly oligarchs that in Britain who have had a major influence on the policies, foreign policies, domestic policies of the United States for 80 years.
Yeah, they've operated really as the brain for all of this. The brain has been coming out of, the Chatham House and these think tanks.
Third world nations had to finance their debt at interest rates above 20%. Okay, so this is, again, also, this is the imperial model. So it's either by free trade, which is quote unquote free trade, which always works in favor of the dominant nation. Or it could be military, but they don't necessarily do that anymore. Or it could be this, through the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, issuing loans to developing nations, get them in trouble.
Right.
This is Perkins, who wrote Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This is what he discussed that he was part of doing.
Right. So if you have to think about it like the same way that that they were controlling all the rates of access, like with the shipping lanes and all of this, like who gets access, and at what cost, at what price. So that's a lot of control, and that's what Sustainable Development Goals are trying to achieve, is like that same system, but like on steroids, as far as trying to control, if you don't believe in this or say this, then we're going to X you out from being able to participate, kind of thing.
So under this system of controlled disintegration, between 1979 and 1983, third world debt levels, remember it's the third world or the global south that the United Nations and the international community are so interested, they care so much about them. Between 79 and 83, third world debt levels, depending on the country, shot up by 40 to 70%. So they're trapped, right? They are seized, they are captured. The truth is, these poverty-stricken nations have, in fact, under internationalism, under the watchful eye of the United Nations, in fact, more than doubled their obligations, and in other senses, tripled their payments to the IMF and World Bank. The horrible truth is that they have been cruelly ripped off at the expense of their own national development. Almost all of these borrowing nations today suffer more than they ever did. They were far better off before the cynical advent of the most dubious policies behind the canard of world development, or we call it today sustainable development. And this article goes on to talk a little bit more about the blueprint of for extinction.
Yeah, another layer to add on to that is in our research, we've uncovered that the Commonwealth of Nations, which is the British Empire across the world, their influence, the ways that they've influenced, that they've quietly, the Commonwealth of Nations today is not the same entity it was a generation ago. Under King Charles III, it has quietly undergone a dramatic rebrand, shifting from a ceremonial post-colonial fraternity to a networked soft governance system deeply embedded in modern globalist initiatives. Far from being a retreat from globalism, the Commonwealth is now at the forefront of ESG-driven economics, digital ID systems, climate policy, standard education reform, soft law frameworks. So this international rules-based system, the UN Charter that wants to go over all of the constitutions around the world, wants to override nation-state constitutions. And all of this is carried out under the language of shared values and development and equity. So just suffice it to say that is the ideological vein that you see the UK and that you see coming from the EU. Is that particular ideological vein, which the Trump administration, if you will go back and look at all of the speeches that they've given and in their policy, is literally going against. okay, guys, you can go in that direction, but we're not doing that. We're not going there. We're not adhering to this. This is not, Rubio even said, like, I was kind of bought in, but you know what? I realized I was wrong.
One of the most important messages from the Munich Security Conference was when Marco Rubio said, globalism was a mistake that we made together.
Yeah.
So that was repentance. I was saying,
Yeah.
look, I was in there too.
Right.
It's wrong. It's bad. I understand now. And when someone says that,
Right. You're
mean-
acknowledging that you bought into that
so,
framework.
but are we to just write that off as though, oh, well, he's lying. He's not being serious.
Yeah, that's what you have to realize there's a lot of bad actors out there right now that are really dangerous, and they don't want you to hear the good news that's out there, like the news that you should be happy about, the fact that there are people in the administration right now that know exactly who the enemy is, know exactly what they're up against. And yeah, if that makes us sound like Q-tards, okay, fine, I'll be in the Q-tard bucket for now.
Yeah.
If we see things going in a different direction, I think those of you that have been with us for years now can see that we will change our mind. We will
Yeah.
go another direction. And
Yeah.
if we see that it looks suspicious and weird, we're going to say, uh-oh, this looks bad.
We fully intend to hold the administration accountable to the policies that they have published in the National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy, and to the rhetoric that they're using and have been using for the last 3 to 6 months that particularly have to do with this return to American sovereignty.
Right. And I'm sorry to interrupt. Just one more thing while we're on that. The America's Counter Cartel Conference and the Shield of the Americas Conference.
Right, that's the new thing, right? It's,
Yeah.
what's the title of it again?
It's
The
the Shield
Americas-
of the Americas.
That's it, yeah, the Shield.
Yeah, so like that is a security initiative focused on cooperation across the Western Hemisphere to combat drug cartels, transnational criminal organizations, which, by the way, tied directly to this City of London Empire of the City apparatus. Okay, so that is transnational criminal organizations, illicit financial networks. So again, here's another instance where you see the Trump administration saying, here we are publicly meeting with different leaders in the Western Hemisphere, and we are trying to go after this illicit financial network, narco-terrorism, cartel entities that are going on. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, so how that reflects the national security strategy. I mean, we had the 3 big points. There is
Prestige, power.
there is prosperity, prestige, power. Prosperity, prestige, and peace.
Peace, yeah.
All right, and
Peace
so
through strength.
peace through strength,
That's
right?
what I was thinking about, yeah.
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other, just to finish up this little article from 2001 about the topic we're talking about today, which was, and I'll give you the author when I get to the bottom because I forgot her name. So what did Hirsch mean in his book by controlled disintegration? It would mean that the world economy would be pushed into disintegration, but not in an uncontrollable fashion. Rather, the plutocrats hoped it could control the process. They posit it would be necessary. Listen to this and see does this fit what we saw over the last 30 years. It would be necessary for outside forces to deliver economic shocks to carry out this disintegration of the world economy. Oil shocks, credit cutoffs, to mainly already struggling poor nations, interest rate shocks, IMF austerity measures, forcing the world economy to go to zero and eventually negative growth. Degrowth. All right. So, and you can see that this has happened.
And let's not be shy about saying that this system is genocidal.
Yeah.
Because it leads to the annihilation of lots of people groups.
What kind of system did those who were writing Project 1980s want? Let's see if
Depopulation.
Let's see if this fits what we've seen and what we've heard. Freeman says that in its 33 books about the topic, the CFR's Project 1980s covered a wide range of subjects, including plans for erecting a Bertrand Russell H.G. Wells form of world government, finding methods to implement the mechanism of stopping weapons of mass destruction, and methods for radical population reduction. All right. The CFR called the overall project the largest undertaking in its history. Their 33 volumes constituted blueprints, which the oligarchy used its power to institute during the second half of the 1970s and 80s. They imposed one of the most profound shifts in economic and nation-state policy during the 20th century. And back to Jimmy Carter was installed as president. The British American Commonwealth's oligarchical faction transferred the CFR's Project 1980s into his administration. And here we go. Two of the project's 9 directors were W. Michael Blumenthal and Zbigniew Brzezinski. They were appointed Treasury Secretary and National Security Advisor, respectively. Cyrus Vance, who headed a Project 1980s working group, was appointed Secretary of State, and Paul Volcker, spokesman for Project 1980s, or Controlled Disintegration, Paul Volcker became Federal Reserve Board Chairman, one of the cats who is all in on controlled disintegration. Carter signed the 1,000-page Global 2000 Ode to Sustainable Growth, Ecology Management, and Population Reduction. Did you catch that? He signed a 1,000-page policy structure called Global 2000, Sustainable Growth. This is before the term was really popularized from the United Nations. Ecology management, there's your climate change, and population reduction. The writers document that $2 billion is the hoped for preferable world population at that time. So at that time, it was higher than that. It would require people to go, people to be gone. Also, in this period, many books by sanctioned elitist ecologists and New Age futurologists were widely distributed, especially in the academic halls of vulnerable minds who would become future guardians of the national patrimony. Again, subtle serpent of suspicion. There's where these Fabian ideas and Marxist ideology were implanted. They dealt with scaremongering the American population with issues of unsustainable growth. You know, the planet's going to be dead. We're going to be gone in 20 years or 12 years or whatever number they choose. Fear-mongering about a future filled with alleged shortages of natural resources, shortages of food, potable water, the grievous state of alleged overpopulation, and world-destroying pollution threats. And this is where we get to, we covered this back during the scamdemic, the Kissinger-Vance document, National Security Memorandum 200 was issued and classified, and then years later, 80 pages of it were declassified. And what we found in that was a shocking piece of pompous bravado, a work of ultimate arrogance by the United States National Security Council under Heinz Kissinger, of course. It demanded the curbing of populations in 13 third world countries, particularly, as we covered on this channel, India was one of the first nations where they focused, taking in all kinds of birth control and shots, if you know what I mean. From its twisted policies came the myriads of population and society-changing programs of the UN and the Third World. These same organizations that the current Trump administration is abandoning, separating the United States from. All right. So that's better. Let me give credit here. Angie Carlson, writing for newswithviews.com back in August of 2001. This is right before things really changed in a big way. So, you know, there's that. Some more of the evidence. National security strategy expressly prioritizes the Western Hemisphere. It calls this the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, lovingly called the Donroe Doctrine. And what it says, though, what does it really mean? It means that the U.S. will reassert and enforce American preeminence in the hemisphere, in the Western Hemisphere, to stabilize the region. And it presents a regional policy as a blend of security, anti-cartel force, commercial diplomacy, supply chain strengthening, and countering outside influence. United Nations, perhaps the UK. Have they really been our closest ally? It's a good question to ask. It also says partner nations should build up their domestic economies while, see that? Partner nations should build up their domestic economies. The exact opposite of the lens we would use to criticize or analyze the Bush, Clinton, Obama administrations, or even the sleepy Joe Biden administration. And then while the hemisphere becomes a stronger market for American commerce and investment. In other words, it gives the American people access to our regional markets. That is not Wilsonian democracy promotion language. It is regional realist language. And I guess the third line of evidence here is the defense documents, National Defense Strategy, align with the same direction. If you go and listen to any speech or address that Hegseth has given, Rubio, Scott Bessent, and I can't remember the guy's name over in Davos who was given the specific Hamiltonian economics talk.
Greer,
Greer?
I believe it was.
He is the undersecretary in the War Department right now. So he's just under Pete Hegseth. Talking about Hamiltonian economics or the American system, which really just means to be self-sufficient and non-dependent on foreign nations to sustain ourselves. The May 2025 Pentagon memorandum
It's Jameson Greer.
Jameson Greer.
Yeah,
okay.
he literally talked about Hamilton, the Hamiltonian system.
Specifically. So really, America First Defense Strategy is what the National Defense Strategy talks about, aimed at peace through strength. And what was the other talking point or phrase? Peace through strength. That's what you said earlier?
Well, yeah.
I thought a peace through what?
Are you talking about prosperity?
I'm talking about the peace.
Peace through construction.
Peace through construction.
That's in the Board of Peace.
Yes, the Board of Peace.
Yeah.
That's one of their mottos: peace through construction, not degrowth,
right?
But building.
Yeah. So it's like once you invest a little bit of time, like understanding the national security strategy and these concepts of the American system and the Hamiltonian system, you're going to then be able to map the territory that you're in. You're going to recognize, because they're operating off of a very tight agenda. So it's not hard to decipher what the administration is doing once you understand the language. Once you understand the agenda, you're going to see them executing that consistently across the board. There's no deviation from their stated agenda of this national security strategy under the American system in adherence to Hamiltonian economics. And again, Alexander Hamilton is a statue that Trump just put into his Rose Garden. So once you understand that you're sort of operating from that basis, then we can say, and by the way, this whole system is part of the founding of the United States of America. It's part of the founders' vision to gain independence from the old world, from Europe, from empire, from imperialism. So this is good. This is a good thing. This keeps us on track to adhering to the United States Constitution under inalienable rights. This is a positive thing.
Okay, so with Iran, we're getting close to an hour, so we'll
probably wrap it up.
We'll try to land the plane here pretty soon, but I do want to mention this help people understand when we say Hamiltonian economics or the American system, what we mean. But just to wrap this up in a bow here, the Board of Peace. A lot of people on our side have identified this as just, it's just another United Nations. It's just another kind of that. Well, not really.
No.
You'll see in their documents when you watch their first board meeting, which you can find on YouTube, they put up some PowerPoints or some slides, and you'll see the term sustainable development in there. And I've seen a lot of people seize on that and go, I see there, it's just the same old thing. But is it? How do they define sustainable? The United Nations doesn't own the word sustainable. What they mean by sustainable development is particularly with regard to Gaza, is to rebuild it and set up an infrastructure and a system, an economy there where the people who live there and the people who did live there who will return or who want to return will have the opportunity to lift themselves up through work, through an economy, so that they can have a life. And the Board of Peace in 10 years' time will hand this over to the people as a sovereign nation. Now, this proves that Trump is not owned and operated. He's not Netanyahu's dog.
No.
He's not owned and operated by
Yeah.
Israel because they're not really all that happy with this.
No, like
They want Gaza.
Israel was not happy about. They don't feel like they got everything they want. They didn't want this development to happen in Gaza. They had a whole different plan for what they wanted to have happen in Gaza to make them feel comfortable. But they had to negotiate, and they had to say, okay, we can't get what we want. You guys are going to come in and you're going to build this strip up, and it's going to be a place where people can, peace through construction, where people can make money and, have actually make wealth and become prosperous and
They have an opportunity.
Right. And so it's not like the Trump administration is not doing what what Israel wants them to do. Like, they're having to concede on a lot of things, but they're willing to do it because they know that we're being reasonable. This is a reasonable approach. And also part of getting rid of that hornet's nest over in Iran is ensuring that whole region, once all these investors come in to make that happen, that Iran's not going to be sitting over there attacking it constantly.
So that's an excellent point.
That's another point,
That's what a lot of people who are criticizing the war on Iran. It's not really a war with Iran at this point. It's like a war on Iran.
It's also, but it's not only is it on Iran, but it's on empire. Because again, it's,
right.
Yeah.
That's the other point. This is not just a war with Iran. What it's also exposing is that this administration is at war with globalism.
Right.
They're at war with these systems we've just described to you. They're at war with controlled disintegration.
Right. So when you see the U.S. going after Iran, it's also that we're actually trying to make right what we did wrong. Like, we were complicit and we were involved in destabilizing Iran.
This is a correction.
It's the right thing to go in there and take that problem that we put in there out, because the United States did have a hand in that, even though it was the British intelligence agencies that was the spearhead of doing all of that. The United States followed suit and was complicit in that. And what we're doing is we're taking it out. And again, this is one of those stronghold nodes where a lot of illicit activity goes on in ways that they're able to have a lot of money extracted, and also a place where they have this little, they can create these radical places that are then used to destabilize through people like what we've seen, around the world with terrorism. So they fund it and radicalize people to be that destabilizing force as well. So there's many layers of what's going on. Suffice it to say, Iran is, it's going to be good for the Board of Peace, for peace through construction. And it's going to be good at taking away illicit capital streams of dark money that come out of that whole Iran pocket, plus the radicalization of people over there.
Okay, so in what you've just said there, I want to answer some of the pushback, some of the excuse me, some of the questions, or some of the objections to what we have here. I've got them written down here if I can't find it here. First of all, let's see. How do we argue Iran? How do you argue that Iran isn't just regime change and more of the same nation building? Iran is a harder case to make than Venezuela. So, we just admit that right up front. This is a far more complex case than Venezuela. But what you saw in Venezuela was not an ongoing operation. You saw an operation to get the criminal, the international criminal,
which probably,
Maduro.
This is speculation, but I bet Maduro is probably giving the Trump administration a lot of valuable insight into how this illicit network is operating with transnational financial institutions.
Particularly the internationalists, or
That's
the
right. Yeah, that's
we
what I
could
mean.
we could just say the British Empire, because it is the outgrowth over decades, over centuries of the British Empire, which is now this internationalism. It's the
CFR.
Fabian force, really,
Yeah.
that we just showed you in this other article. So you didn't see that happen in Venezuela, but Iran's a more difficult case. But I'll try to make it the strongest pro-administration case for what's happening in Iran, because a lot of the people in Trump's base that are upset with him for this war on Iran have a good case when they say, well, what about when the bombs drop? You got a nation of 90 million. We've never tried to do this kind of thing in a nation that large. How are you going to get control of that? How are you going to ensure that something worse, like in the Bible, when you cast out one demon,
Seven more come.
someone who's not saved,
7 more powerful ones.
7 more come right in
Yeah.
behind it and find a clean swept house to set
Yeah.
up their operation. Same thing. So that's a good argument. I mean, that's a good objection. How do we respond to that? Well, we do have this board of peace that they don't seem to be they don't seem to be recognizing as any kind of legitimate force yet. Time will tell. Maybe it won't be. But as we analyze it, as Christians, just weights and measures. What have they said their goals are? Is it just another United Nations? So really, the Board of Peace is an exercise in, well, as you said right here in the article. Let me just quote the article that you wrote here. The Board of Peace framework. Seen through the Board of Peace framework, the operation in Iran is about removing the last engine of a perpetual regional conflict, so a new architecture of stability and development, not degrowth, can take root. Instead of exporting regime change, it seeks to end the system that profited from the chaos in the region in the first place, which would be primarily British petroleum.
And let's not get it crooked here. We've been describing for a year and a half now, at least. I don't know. It feels like a time. I don't know how to judge time, but the United States has been like surrounded by basically communist, socialist strongholds all over the world, encroaching into the hemisphere, all around us, in Canada, in Mexico. In Cuba, in Venezuela, a huge Islamic, radical Muslim Brotherhood. That's a whole nother, the Muslim Brotherhood.
That's a point I needed to follow up on.
That's a creation of MI6, is the Muslim Brotherhood.
Why is the war on Iran? Why is it a war on imperialism? And that is because when you talk about Iran and you talk about Hamas, you're talking about the Muslim Brotherhood. And where did the Muslim Brotherhood come from? Well, evidence suggests that it was a creation of, guess who? British intelligence.
Exactly. Just like they created Christian Zionism. Okay, so that's a whole nother topic, because we know that John Darby and Christian Zionism was out of the think tanks of, this British imperial enclave. And, so they wanted those two heretical or just faulty, weaponized ideologies to go head to head to bring about their third world war. That's a whole nother topic that we can get into, but suffice it to say, we are going after Iran. We have to realize that Venezuela, Mexico, there's even things that the Trump administration is doing in Africa to take out imperial power there too. Yeah. So it's like he's taking down all these strongholds and nodes that financially support globalism, that financially support, when we say globalism, that really means communism. And yes, that entails facets of fascism and communism, because it's the same thing. But we've been surrounded, so it makes sense that to do America first, you actually need to go and clean up your backyard and get rid of all of these ways and weaken the entire system before you go in and try to take it down in the United States. Because if we just started trying to hack away at it here in the United States first, think about how we would be surrounded with all of these other things. So this, we have this access to this American military, which, by the way, historically, the New World Order has used the American military to go around. We're like the dumb giant who's gone around and done all this stuff on behalf of the New World Order. But Trump is using the administration and the military right now to get rid of the communist powers around the world so that we can then hone in and make America safer. And then, once we've got that done, once we've cleared that up, then we're going to deal with what's going on here in the nation.
So when Trump says make America safe again, a lot of people assume that what he means is to make America safe, to protect us from cartels or Islamist extremism or terrorism. And those things are true, but ultimately to make America safe from the empire.
Yeah.
The empire that had control, more control than Israel ever has over our government.
And the NGOs, USAID, we've been shutting down. So we've been shutting down NGOs. We've been shutting down United Nation nodes. We've been shutting down illicit dark money capital flows. This is legit, guys. Like, feel good about this, please.
So, by the way, with USAID in Egypt, right, we just saw Larry Taunton did a report from Israel. And he was talking about when he went to Egypt several months ago to look at the U.S. aid facility in Egypt.
Yep.
And
7 miles from the border of Israel.
Was almost detained and disappeared there, but was able to talk his way out of it. And the problem is they didn't want him to see inside the USAID compound in Egypt.
What was really going on.
And if it was just aid, if it was just rice and food and clothing and medicine, then why wouldn't you show it? Why wouldn't you be proud to say, look at all this good stuff we have to give people? It's because most likely, we're just speculating here, but why wouldn't they show it? The speculation from Taunton and others is that particular USAID facility is where they were storing weapons and munitions to funnel into Gaza
under the guise of humanitarian aid.
To arm Hamas.
So for human rights and humanitarian aid, we're going to, have a through way to have access to these war zones. Why? So we can send in our destabilizing forces to cause chaos. Yay. Okay. Sound familiar? So, trying to put the kibosh on all of that kind of stuff, and also trying to put the kibosh on it from the sense of making it attractive. So if we can provide Egypt, like, hey, we're going to come over here and stabilize your region so you don't have to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. So you can actually have a legit, way of bringing in income. I think people are into it. That's why you saw such a great response for the leaders that came together to say, okay, we will do this. We would prefer to be doing things above board rather than the scary way that you might lose family members overnight, So
the entire premise of the Board of Peace strategy is to break the cycle of outside manipulation, not replace one foreign-aligned proxy with another, so that Iran's future and its wealth remains in the hands of its own people rather than external financial interests. So how do we hold the administration accountable to that? We watch. And if they start allowing groups of NGOs to come in there and set up shop,
right,
then we'll know there's a problem.
And I think one part of that, too, where we saw the First Lady, it was unprecedented, the first time in history where a First Lady, ran the UN Council. Yeah. So that's a hotbed for conspiracy theories. But what was she dealing with there? She was dealing with children in conflict. And so, again, if you know the playbook of the globalists, they're going to use, we've got to, go in and help the children, right? So we know that when they say we're going to go help the children, or when we're going to give humanitarian aid, that's just them securing a pipeline to then have access to those war zones where they can send in their activists to go in and destabilize things and make things go wrong. So by sitting at the table, that's a way that the Trump administration is trying to put the kibosh on that. Hey, you're not going to use your human rights cover to go in and try to destabilize this war, trying to cut.
That's a good thing.
It's like a whack-a-mole. It's like you try to put as many, you know what I mean, preventative measures in place as possible.
So the evidence is before us that this administration is trying to snuff out all of those moles. He's trying to whack down all of the moles that pop up, and one of them would be USAID in Egypt. You know, he's already defunded USAID to a great extent anyway. And it just so happens, as Taunton reported, that the president was made aware of his encounter at USAID in Egypt.
So he actually gave a call to Congress about what he saw down there, and they said, the U.S. government said, we've got a rogue agency operating.
Yeah.
And then they
And
shut
probably
it down.
more. Probably many more of
Obvious,
those.
yeah, many more. So that also indicates that the Trump administration is like trying to gain information and then trying to do the right thing. You know,
So it is a break with the very system. It's a break with the paradigm that people are trying to use to criticize this administration. It's actually a break with that system. And then there's another point. You know what? Trump said that this war on Iran is about the future.
right.
It's about the future, and particularly about the future for the American people. And I think there's one piece of evidence that supports that. This war has not been good for
Yeah.
the Republican Party or Trump in particular with the midterms coming up.
Well, I don't, yeah, and it has been stated that they really did feel as if they were like super close to having a nuke. So,
Yeah, I mean,
and
there's-
that being the case,
that's the case.
like we can argue all day long about who has that right or wrong.
Is that babies in the incubators
yeah,
or
is that
not?
babies in the incubators? Is that mass, weapons of mass destruction? We can argue that, but Trump really did see it. I would say see it primarily as this was another major node of illicit financial flows going on that destabilize the entire Middle East region, and that we are in part responsible for creating because of the regime change that we were involved in with MI6, with the Shah, that whole situation there.
Yeah, it's a
So,
corrective.
It's a corrective.
Well, why can't the part of the base that's angry with Trump about this see that part? Why can't they see that this is a corrective of the very thing that they think this is? But here's a question for you: is regime change always necessarily bad?
Well, you can't say anything is always necessarily bad,
Well, I
because
mean,
what the devil meant for evil, God can use for good.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
we know that.
It depends on the circumstances, and it depends on whether or not just war theory is being honored. And I think in this case, just war theory, it needs to be legitimate, proportional. It needs to end when the objective is over, and the administration so far has held to that. They keep repeating that is the purpose. Now, in the Bible, governments are given the power of the sword, right? To restrain evil, punish the wicked, and preserve and protect the good. And so this war, this military action, this war on Iran some people are saying, well, there was no imminent threat to us. Well, either they were close to having a nuke or they weren't, because we know they never stopped their enrichment programs, what was left of them. But I think more than imminent threat, this was a war of opportunity and necessity, because at this point in time, the IRGC happens to be weaker than it has been in a long time, because you've seen Assad gone in Syria. So that's a little bit of let's see, cooperation, someone who would cooperate with that, gone. Hamas is mostly under control. And Iran's criminal alliance with Maduro is over.
Yeah, so think of it as like, we've got all of these strongholds and nodes around the planet that have been ways in which the globalists have secured their money to figure out ways to enslave all of us. And so what we're trying to do is like take all of those nodes out.
Also, last week, we saw something very interesting happen. 2 votes came up in the House, one in the upper chamber, one in the lower chamber. And they both voted down measures to limit Trump's authority in this particular action.
Well, that's because they're hoping to be able to you know, what
There
I mean.
is
They're
an-
hoping, actually, the neocons,
Yeah.
they would love for after the 60-day or 90-day period to then declare war and then put us into a forever war. Like, they would love that. That's why you also hear the Trump administration keep saying, we want to do this, you know, we'll do it for as long as it takes, but we want to do it swiftly.
The other argument against it is that, well, they don't have a clear end game. Well, I think if Trump deserves any benefit of the doubt, over the last year, he has seemed to have proven that he knows what's coming. He's got good people around him. I mean, the ones closest to him.
Well, he knows what's at stake, that if we lose the midterms, like, it's over. Like, they'll start trying to impeach him, and we'll just be bogged down in lawfare, like, for the rest of his term. It'll be a total nightmare.
So we hold them accountable, right? In Iran, we hold the administration accountable to what its stated goals were. If the campaign remains limited to degrading these strategic threats, preventing a nuclear breakout, stabilizing the region, breaking down the proxy capacity of Iran and those who are doing business with them, and creating a space for the Iranian people to engage in self-government without U.S. occupation or non-governmental organization administered nation building, then it will be quite distinguishable from the liberal internationalist wars of transformation or nation building or spreading democracy. If it becomes open-ended, if there's an occupation that drags on for months or years, if the purpose becomes more vague or like it's a managerial post-war design, then the old anti-neocon critique would become relevant again, right? So that's how we can be fair about this. That is the right standard to use to deal with this. So people will ask, they'll say, isn't this just another Iraq-style regime change war? My response would be, no. Iraq was built on the idea that America should occupy and rebuild a country to spread democracy. The current doctrine explicitly rejects that model. The stated objective now is limited. Neutralize threats, allow the nation to govern itself without hostile regimes destabilizing the region. The Bush-era doctrine assumed America should remake societies in our image. But the 2025 United States National Security Strategy rejects that approach outright. It prioritizes sovereignty and limited objectives. If operations remain short and avoid occupation or NGO-driven nation building, then we're looking at a fundamentally different model of foreign policy, something that we should celebrate. Why should conservatives, why should anyone who voted for Trump, who's angry with him now, why should you trust him when we've seen decades of corruption that looks kind of like this? Let me talk to Christians. Don't trust blindly. We're supposed to evaluate the evidence fairly. The policies today are openly rejecting the globalist model that many conservatives, many of us, opposed for decades. That doesn't mean blind trust. It means judging the administration by what it actually does, not by the assumptions of past administrations. Because after 9/11, right, many of us, many conservatives, many libertarians, many people correctly identified corruption and this globalist overreach, even though we didn't quite have a name for it. We would call it the New World Order, or we would call it whatever. But the paradigm has changed. The current administration is withdrawing from multilateral institutions, creating new relationships. Maybe the Core Five Alliance, help me get this right, which would be the United States, Russia, China, India, and Japan. Mm-hmm. It's not an officially released thing, right? But it is one that's out there, and they're not really denying it. That is something that Trump has been, the administration and the diplomats in the administration have been working on since last year.
And according to political analysts, it was actually leaked at one point. It just didn't make it into the official cut of the national security strategy. So for the Core Five Alliance.
What about intervening in other countries? Isn't America just acting like an empire by intervening in other countries? Well, here's the difference. Empire seeks permanent control and particularly extraction of resources. The American constitutional model seeks stability and self-government, and then to be able to do business with these nations if they're a resource-rich oil nation or something. So if the objective is removing threats and allowing nations to govern themselves without occupation, that's not empire. That would be restraint of evil combined with strength. Because empire historically means ruling other nations indefinitely. This administration's stated objective, places like Venezuela and Iran, is the opposite. Just like you said in the article, is the opposite.
The layman way of saying it is that, in layman's terms, what the Trump administration is doing right now through the national security strategy as their agenda is trying to ensure that all nation states have the right to sovereignty.
Yeah, that's an excellent thing. Like, folks, the reason we were so upset with government after 9/11 and during COVID and all this, and yes, you can say Donald Trump was in office when COVID started. You know, there's a lot of evidence. I'm not trying to defend him. He has made some bad decisions where COVID was involved, and he had to be told by people where his error was there.
And he's also a Norman Vincent Peale kind of guy. Like, he's power of positive thinking. For him, his theology is like, he can't say anything negative about what he's done because that would go against his theology. You know, he believes in that. Like, he can't, people say that he's like narcissistic, but really he's adherent. I mean, I grew up with my own mother playing Norman Vincent Peale tapes in the car, like every afternoon, about the power of positive thinking. I'm telling you, these people think that if they think anything negative, it brings it about, like it manifests it. So we're not saying that Trump is a Christian, although since everything that's happened this past year, he certainly seems to be a lot more humble and a lot more reverent toward God. And that's a positive, even if he has lunatics like Paula White in the White House still. But anyway, all that to say, like, the reason why you don't hear him saying a lot of self-deprecating things, I think, is because his framework, his theology, if you will, is a theology of positive thinking and positive results. So
okay, we've got about 5 minutes, and I want to make sure we get to this, and we can come back to this in a follow-up show.
Yes.
Some other time down the road and talk about what is this economic system that we're talking about here. When we say the Hamiltonian system or the American system, let's refer to, I've got it on the screen here for you, a book by Henry C. Carey.
And again, we were always told that we either have the choice of capitalism, free markets, or like a socialism thing. What's been hidden from us is the American system of economy. So that's been hidden from us, and that's what's now on in the national security strategy. And this is why you see London really like hating on us, and that's why you see the European Union really hating on us, because that's the adversarial thing. Like, that's why you see the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, hating on the American system of Hamiltonian economics, because it is their enemy number one. We are at odds. They do not like it. So they're going to be doing everything they can with propaganda to try to get the American people not to see what's really going on. But now you know.
Right. So let me just give a little bit of background from Carey, okay? And then the intellectual tradition of the American system. Just a few quotes to open this up for you so you understand what the administration is actually trying to create. What they're leaving, we've established what they're leaving. What are they trying to create? So Henry C. Carey was the foremost economist before and during the Civil War period. He was an economic advisor to Lincoln. And when he appears in the conversation today, that signals a return to an American system. And we've heard these concepts mentioned, Hamiltonian system, economics, and we've heard these terms and these ideas mentioned from
the administration
themselves, particularly at Davos, of all places.
Yes.
The one economic tradition built specifically to break the grip of British free trade empire and restore national sovereignty. Carey's work is significant because it represents the intellectual foundation of the American system, a sovereign, production-based economic model historically positioned in opposition to British free trade imperial finance. Its reappearance in current policy discussions today, cited by supporters as evidence that Trump administration is drawing from a tradition that prioritizes national development over globalized economic dependency. So what we're witnessing is not the expansion of an American empire, but the dismantling of the globalist system that turned permanent instability into profit. That's what is meant by free trade. It creates conditions where the stronger nations dominate the weaker. And as you've seen from the actions of the empire, I don't want to open this can of worms, but I will mention it briefly. The influence that the British Empire had on the colonies leading up to the Civil War, running the same kind of operations. Lord Palmerston,
funding it,
Lord Palmerston, who was
funding the South,
the creator, I guess, of
the color revolution,
the what we know today as the modern color revolution, where you control things through propaganda. You control an economy. So.
By the way, when we have the Reverend Matthew Littlefield from Australia back on, we are going to talk about British free trade.
So find the article on free trade right quick so I can pull that up. That's a good, I can put
sure.
your article on free trade.
If you just search in the archive for free trade.
Okay. So the fact that Kerry is coming up and Hamiltonian economics is coming up is an excellent sign. Plus the stated policies and the one major person involved in writing the national security strategy, Michael Anton, his position is American system, pro-sovereignty, pro-self-sufficiency. So one of Kerry's, this is interesting because we were trying to identify where this has come from. One of Kerry's most devastating quotations exposes what he believed was the real purpose of British free trade ideology. Now, the context for this comment or this quote is pre-Civil War. What was going on in the South, where the British were pretty much controlling the South economically. The South would produce agriculture, cotton, and through the process of economic dumping, the British would run the price down so low that you had to use slaves to produce it. One of the quotes I read in Kerry was that wherever the empire goes, slavery walks with it hand in hand. So here's one of the quotes, quoting a British economist. What we meant by free trade was nothing more nor less, by means of the great advantages we enjoyed, to get a monopoly of all their markets for our manufacturers and to prevent them, one and all, from ever becoming manufacturing nations. That was the goal of the empire back then, and that was the goal of the same people in the early to mid 1900s with this controlled disintegration movement. Same thing. They never wanted us to be a sovereign nation, and they've been trying to take us down for 80 years.
And again, Alexander Hamilton's statue has been erected in the Rose Garden of Trump. So, all the dots and all the signs are there. If you want to look up its unrestrained trade is inherently evil, back in March 2025.
Okay, unrestrained trade. Now, Matthew Littlefield has done also, and he's
written about it in his book, Like a Roaring Lion. There's a lecture that he's done on it.
And you mentioned his article that he wrote about it in your article too, right? Mm-hmm. Free trade is not biblical. How about that for a claim? Well, that claim is made and supported here in this article. You can check this article out for those details, but we'll finish up here with this. What we're talking about, Henry C. Carey's arguments are not an isolated economic theory, but part of a long intellectual tradition of American political economy. From the early republic through the 19th century, a number of American statesmen and economists developed what later became known as the American system. What is the American system? All right, let's define it. The American system is a framework designed to secure national independence. What is globalism? It is meant to ensure dependence on other nations. A framework designed to secure national independence, domestic prosperity, that would be the American people, and broad social development through strategic economic policy, building. What was the phrase again? Through construction, peace through construction.
Yes, peace through construction.
Peace through construction, not through managed decline. So the lineage runs most clearly through Alexander Hamilton, Henry Clay, Abraham Lincoln, and Henry C. Carey.
Right.
And the reason Lincoln is important here, right quick. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say with the H.C. Carey document, I mean, the title says it all. It literally says commerce, Christianity, and civilization versus the British free trade. It says, that's literally what it says, that's the title, commerce, Christianity, and civilization versus British free trade. So here we are, still at war we're still tussling, trying to assert our independence all these hundreds of years later. And they've tried to suppress this, guys. This is exciting. This is really exciting.
All right. So Alexander Hamilton, Hamiltonian economics, right? This, what we mean by when we say Hamiltonian economics or the American system, this is the foundational vision for America. The intellectual roots of this idea, the one that the Trump administration is trying to return to, begin with Alexander Hamilton, particularly his 1791 report on manufactures. Hamilton argued that political independence would be fragile without economic independence. So what was the CFR's document about? About controlled disintegration,
Degrowth.
managed decline, degrowth to bring the United States down in status. If the United States remained primarily an exporter of raw agricultural products while importing finished goods from Europe, it would remain economically subordinate. That is how the empire works, right? They don't want you to be a manufacturing nation. They want you to produce raw materials so they can buy them for you very cheaply and then sell those products back to you, making you subordinate on them. That is how the British imperial system operated. Look at examples like Brazil. That's exactly what they did there. And it's what they attempted to do in the colonies and were successful right up until the point where it caused a civil war.
And by the way, an interesting point in listening and thinking about these issues, people speak about, this conflict is, it's been said that China and Russia, by the way, they realize that this is a fight amongst us. Like
so they're staying out of it.
Like the Anglosphere, of nations.
The white people, the white people going to fight.
The honkies, right? That they recognize that it's like infighting that we're doing, and so they're going to stay out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably what you're going to really see is that Russia and China, their ancient cultures, they're just going to be staying out of it because they know that it's between really the British establishment and the Americans right now. That's what all of the uproar that's going on right now is who gets to seat power at the end of the day.
Okay, so to finish up on Hamilton and to wrap this show up, Hamiltonian economics is really about self-sufficiency. About the American system is about we're going to bring our manufacturing back so that we can provide our own raw materials and get some from other people when the price is right.
Production-based economic model.
When the deal is good for us, and avoid being dependent on these other nations, particularly the ones of empire. Okay, Hamilton therefore proposed policies intended to cultivate domestic industry. Now, see if any of these ring true with what you've seen from this administration. First on the list, protective tariffs. Abraham Lincoln. So the reason you have to appreciate the North in this Civil War context is they were trying to break free from the British Empire by creating our own manufacturing base here. But they wanted us just to remain the provider of the raw materials, the cotton and whatever else. And they would create the finished goods and sell them back to us. And therefore, Lincoln understood this. So he put on these protective tariffs. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, it's like, that saying, nothing new under the sun. We're still battling out we're still duking it out,
Okay. Support for manufacturing. Hamilton promoted to build up a strong manufacturing base here. This is what the administration's doing, trying to reshore all of our industries, and particularly with technology now and AI, this administration wants us to be the world leader in it.
And also, you've seen the Department of War come out and make, that they're not going to participate. And like, if you're going to indoctrinate people with woke ideology, we're not going to have them in the army.
Yeah.
So, stuff like that.
Infrastructure development, right? Making sure that all of our infrastructure, our roads, and our energy grid is up to date and secure. This administration is doing this. And so Hamilton's reasoning was strategic as well as economic. A diversified industrial economy strengthens national power and resilience. Resilience to what? Resilience to imperialism and domination, economic domination through free trade.
We really are going through a nasty divorce with City of London, a.k.a. Davos, a.k.a. the Great Reset, a.k.a. European Union. We're going through a nasty divorce. That's what's happening.
And particularly the Fabians.
Yeah.
A nice divorce with the Fabians.
With the Fabians.
Okay.
All right, that's probably enough.
That's a good spot to leave it.
I think, guys, download this video because we really said some stuff that honestly I don't hear anybody else like saying, and we said a lot of stuff about,
well, you can find
USAID and things that are really sensitive. So I if you can download this video,
you can find a lot of details here over at the Armor of Truth Substack. So please subscribe to our Substack. This video is also streaming live on Substack right now, as well as over on Rumble. So we have those 3 platforms covered with our flagship show.
This one, though, I think might actually get taken down. I wouldn't be surprised.
Who knows? We have all kinds of weird things happen on
do.
YouTube. Who knows why?
Yeah.
They don't like us. But that'll wrap it up for today.
And if you have any questions, please email us at hello@armoroftruth.net.
hello@armoroftruth.net.
Yeah, if you want to ask us.
I talked over you there. So hello@armoroftruth.net. Email us there. Any questions you have, any criticisms, objections, whatever, interact with us there. And if you can support us, if you'd like to, any amount is a huge blessing.
Please pray for us.
We could use your
Number
prayers
one, please pray for us.
as well. It's so difficult for us. You can tell how through our approach, we are constantly putting ourselves on an island by ourselves because we're not following any particular movement or political group. We're just following the truth. We're trying to identify these things as they appear in front of us and make a judgment with Scripture as our foundation and ultimate lens for all things good and evil.
And if anybody missed the last show that Brad did, it's really, really good as far as the just cause for the war and how to think about it biblically. So anybody that missed that show, I really encourage you to go back and watch that one.
Yeah, there it is. That's the show we did with Matthew. There we go. Who Would Jesus Bomb is the name of that show. And that was particularly a response to an interaction you had with a good friend, right? Who was asking the question, I don't think it aligns with Christian values at all to be bombing Iran.
Yeah, that was really useful because he was giving it a very standard list of objections that secular-minded people typically will have. So we felt like this would be also really great for people to help think through these issues.
Yeah, and you can see back over these last half a dozen videos or so. We did one 3 weeks ago with Reverend Matthew Littlefield on Should Christians Care About Politics? Well, that's one of the ways that you love your neighbor, is by caring about politics and making sure that they're not going to be oppressed by Fabian policies. We talked about the forever war issue and regime change in Iran back in 434. And other things you can check out. Today, we're trying to deal with healing the MAGA divide by bringing you some well-needed truth and context to all of this. And I would say this as a final note. Of all the arguments against... Of all the arguments against the administration's actions right now, the constitutional argument is the one that holds the most weight. I don't particularly subscribe to that, to the view that it's an unconstitutional war, because there's a lot of debate back and forth on the War Powers Act, which came along after Vietnam. And so that's the one I respect the most, but I still don't agree with it.
Well, because there really was a legitimate worry about being hit imminently, and you can't notify 253 members of Congress without leaking that you're about to go and try to nip that in the bud.
They're known to leak.
Right. So, and everything was actually, like, the protocol was followed as far as notifying the 8. Who are they called? The 8, whatever they're
Gang
called.
of 8.
The Gang of 8. So the Gang of 8 was notified in advance. Then they were notified within the 48-hour period. And they actually did everything according to legal protocol of what they needed to do. So it's not like they went and did something rogue. But of course, left-leaning globalist media will tell you the opposite of that all day long. Why? Because they can. But that's just not true. And they know it. And that's why you see the war continuing on right now, because they did, in fact, notify who they needed to notify. And so, I just wanted to
There's a
clarify
debate
that,
about whether every president since the War Powers Act was enacted has disagreed with its constitutionality. Again, I respect that argument. That's a good debate to have, but
they did follow the legal protocol that they had to do.
Yes, no, they did.
Done.
They didn't do anything illegal. And
Right.
and as Christians, we have an inheritance of liberty here in America that we have to defend and protect.
Right.
But we also have a standard higher than the Constitution, which informs it, and it informs how we think about the Constitution. And is it in our best interest? Does it align biblically? This is ultimately that's where the rubber meets the road
Right.
for us.
And the other issue too is that what the devil meant for evil, God can use for good. So maybe nefarious powers did do the War Powers Act or whatever. You know what I mean? Like maybe they did mean it for evil, for like a Biden or you know what I mean, like one of these a Kamala Harris administration. But because of those systems that they put in place, it made it to where we could actually counteract the treasonous forces that are trying to take down the United States. So we are in an unprecedented time right now in the history of our nation.
Yeah,
and
we have reason to be hopeful.
We have reason to be hopeful. And again, God will always, God is greater. And so even as much as the enemy devises plots and plans, if we repent and lean on him and do our mission, which is, as watchmen on the wall, warn the saints and then keep the gospel, the Great Commission going forward, God can bless that.
Yeah, do things that God can bless, right? Okay, thanks to Ben Blanco for being in the chat today.
I know, it's Mo Griff.
Oh, that's Mo Griff?
Yeah.
Okay, Ben Blanco and Del Griff and Lamb's Grace.
Amanda.
And Amanda Sewell.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you for being with us, folks. We'll see you again here very soon. God bless you.
God bless you guys. Thank you.
As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. The average American, they say, soft and decadent. He'll become paralyzed with fear and panic. He'll run away and hide and do nothing to interfere as they strike at the community's power centers. Any all-out revolution must create a state of crisis wherein almost all of the male population would be forced to remain in their homes because of its affluence. It has waxed soft. The motive force behind its life drive is its endless pursuit of prestige, conspicuous consumption, and sensual pleasure. After the stage is properly set, America could be brought to her knees in 90 days. Ladies and gentlemen, the organization behind these preparations has almost unlimited financial resources. Our enemies are deadly serious about their task, and it's nothing short of national suicide for us to continue to ignore their plans and their progress. The strategy calls for the quiet conversion of our government. They have one and only one solution for all problems: more government, and then more and more until it's total government. In 1943, the following directive was issued from party headquarters. It read, "When certain obstructionists become too irritating, label them after suitable build-ups as fascist. Label them as fascist or Nazi or anti-Semitic, and use the prestige of anti-fascist and tolerance organizations to discredit them. In the public mind, constantly associate those who oppose us with those names which already have a bad smell. The association will, after enough repetition, become fact in the public mind."
Because I don't hate anybody. Now, I want to see every single solitary person on this earth. I want to see their soul saved. Every single solitary person. And each and every one of us that calls ourselves a Christian should pray vehemently for their souls, that we would see them in heaven and forget about all this when we get up there.